I think most people have been lied to about what a business actually is. We've been taught that a business is simply a mechanism for making money. You find a gap in the market, you identify a problem, you build a solution, you run ads, you scale, you exit. And while that formula may produce income, it rarely produces fulfillment. It rarely produces freedom, and it almost never produces work that someone wants to devote the next 30 years of their life to. That's why so many entrepreneurs eventually feel trapped inside the very business they dreamed of building. They started a company in pursuit of freedom and somehow ended up creating a more demanding job than the one they left behind. They become exhausted, disillusioned, burned out, not because they're incapable, but because they built their business from the outside in instead of from the inside out. So I want to propose something radically different today. I don't believe the greatest businesses in history were created because someone found an opportunity. I believe they were created because someone found themselves. See, Apple wasn't merely a technology company. It was Steve Jobs' obsession with simplicity, elegance, craftsmanship, and beauty rendered into products. His fascination with calligraphy and design, things that seemed almost impractical at the time, eventually influenced the typography and the aesthetic philosophy of one of the most valuable companies ever built. Disney wasn't simply an animation studio. It was Walt Disney's imagination turned into an experience the rest of the world could step inside. The company became an extension of the man. And when I finally looked honestly at my own business, I realized the same thing was true. My company is nothing more than my own suffering translated into tools that help other people suffer less. Every framework I've ever taught emerged because I desperately needed it first. Every coaching process came from a problem I had to solve inside myself. The business didn't begin with a market, it began with a life lived. And that realization changed the way I think about entrepreneurship forever. In fact, I would say something even stronger. Most people think they're trying to choose the right business. I think their business has been choosing them their entire lives. I think every experience that you've had has been preparing you for the work you're uniquely qualified to do. Every failure, every heartbreak, every strange obsession, every challenge, every moment where someone looked at you and said, I never thought about it that way before. You were collecting the raw materials for your life's work. And if that's true, then perhaps the entrepreneur's job isn't to invent a business. Perhaps it's simply to recognize the one that has been trying to emerge through them all along. See, I believe there are fundamentally two different kinds of businesses. The first is what I would call an opportunity-based business. You discover a way to make money. Maybe there's a product trending online. Maybe there's an underserved market. Maybe someone teaches you a business model and you replicate it. There's nothing inherently wrong with this approach. Many people become financially successful doing exactly this. But these businesses often have a ceiling. Eventually, the founder becomes disconnected from purpose because purpose was never the reason they started the business in the first place. The business was chosen because it looked profitable. And when adversity comes, as it always does, the emotional fuel runs out. Now, the second type of business is entirely different. I call it a spiritual vision-based business. Not because it has anything to do with religion or spirituality, but because it is animated by something deeper than economics. It starts with identity. Like, who have you become? What have you become? What have you learned that cannot be taught from a textbook? What patterns do you see that other people consistently miss? Because I believe a true business is not merely an economic engine. It is the rendering of your lived experience into a scalable vehicle for sharing the essence of who you've become to the world. I'm going to say that again. A business, in its purest form, is the rendering of your lived experience into a scalable vehicle for sharing the essence of who you've become to the world. And that single distinction changes everything. Because now your struggle has value. Your experience has value. Your personal quirkiness has value. No part of you or your lived experience is wasted, and everything becomes potential intellectual property. And here's the beautiful irony. The very experiences that most people spend years trying to cover up or avoid are usually the foundation of the business that you're meant to build. And that certainly has happened to me. When I was younger, one of my favorite television shows was The A-Team. Now, you may or may not remember it. I was born way back in the 1900s. But as a kid, I didn't love the show because of the explosions or the action scenes. What fascinated me was the premise. It was a group of outsiders, sort of misfits who didn't fit inside the system, people who had unusual skills, who traveled from town to town, helping those who couldn't protect themselves. And when I was in the first grade, my teacher asked the class, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And one kid said, "I want to be a doctor." Another said a lawyer, another said a fireman. I raised my hand and said proudly, "I want to be on the A-team." I didn't know then that the trajectory of my life was charted to inspire me to want to help people who felt helpless, who felt trapped in a system, who were tired of being bullied by life, and who wanted to reclaim control of their reality. You know, I think when we say these kind of things that other people hear, it sounds funny or crazy when we're kids, but we're not actually making things up as kids. I believe we are remembering our future. So, my mom used to say that I was like George Washington. You know that story where he chopped down the cherry tree and he said, "I cannot tell a lie, I chopped down the cherry tree"? I was radically honest, sometimes painfully honest. At times it felt like a weakness because I couldn't pretend to be something or someone that I wasn't. But decades later, you guys are telling me that's my superpower. I see the comments on the show. My authenticity, my vulnerability, my honesty. The thing that I once believed disqualified me became the very thing that differentiates me. So my question is, how many qualities inside of you have you dismissed because they felt too ordinary? How many gifts have you ignored because they came so naturally that you assumed, well, everybody must do this or have this? What if the thing that you've been overlooking is actually the thing that you've been preparing for your entire life? And that's where I think most people ask the wrong question. They say, what business should I start? And I think the better question is, who have I become and what is trying to express itself through me? Because once you answer that question, the business stops feeling like something you have to force and it starts feeling like something that has finally found its voice. Now again, if what I'm saying is true, then it changes the entire entrepreneurial conversation. The question is no longer, how do I find the right business? The question becomes, how do I discover what my life has already been trying to teach me? Because I believe every entrepreneur eventually builds one thing. They build themselves. The company is simply the visible manifestation of that invisible work. And think about the entrepreneurs that you admire most, the truly iconic ones. Their businesses don't feel separate from who they are. They feel like extensions of their identity. The company becomes the embodiment of a philosophy. The product becomes the embodiment of a worldview. And that's why those businesses succeed. They're not built around transactions. They're built around truth. Now, this doesn't mean every entrepreneur has to become a coach or a speaker. Far from it. You might build a software company or a supplement company or a financial advisory firm or a construction company or a real estate empire. I would say the industry doesn't matter. Who you're building from is what matters. Because a supplement company built by someone who genuinely transformed their own health carries a completely different frequency than one built simply because supplements have good margins. You hear what I'm saying? Like a software platform created because its founder spent years wrestling with inefficiency carries a different authenticity than software created because SaaS valuations are attractive. So the external business models may look identical, but the internal operating system is completely different. And people can feel the difference, even if they can't explain it. Because authenticity is magnetic and alignment builds trust. And trust has become one of the rarest commodities in the modern economy. We're entering a world where AI can generate articles and videos and images and podcasts and sales copy and emails, all the stuff in seconds. Information is becoming infinitely abundant, which means information is becoming less valuable. What's becoming more valuable is coherence, lived experience, story. Because AI can summarize 10,000 books, but it can't be your lived experience. That's why I believe your lived experience is becoming one of the most valuable assets you own. Not because your story has to be movie worthy, but because your story produces a perspective that no one else can duplicate. And that perspective becomes the foundation of your business. When I look back over my life, I can see the breadcrumbs everywhere. Like for years, I thought my life had been random, disconnected, one chapter after another with no obvious relationship. And then one day I realized Every chapter had been preparing me for the next one. Like early in my career, I became fascinated with search engine optimization. And at first glance, that looks completely disconnected from personal growth and human potential. Totally unrelated worlds, but it wasn't. Because SEO taught me to identify patterns hidden beneath complexity. It taught me that underneath millions of web pages, there were organizing principles that determined search results. But that same pattern recognition eventually became the foundation of my coaching. Like today, I look for hidden operating systems inside human beings, beliefs, identities, nervous system patterns, subconscious programs. It's the exact same skill. Nothing was wasted. And I could look back and say, man, I wasted decades in drug and alcohol and sex addiction. But everything I learned in my recovery, from the importance of fellowship to the letting go of resentment to a structure like the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, it all set the stage for the frameworks and programs I'm designing today. And more importantly, for who I've become. My suffering became my intellectual property. And that's why I believe your greatest business asset may not be your resume. It may be the thing that you've spent your whole life trying to hide. Maybe it's your divorce or a bankruptcy or addiction or illness or insecurity or a failure or years of feeling different. Those experiences don't disqualify you. They are your resume because they gave you access to understanding that cannot be learned academically. I'm not saying everyone should build a business around trauma, but we've all experienced challenges. And overcoming those challenges has qualified you. So if you were sitting across from me and you asked me where to begin, I wouldn't start with market research. I'd start with your autobiography. I'd ask you to spend an afternoon with a journal. No phone, no distractions, no AI, just you. And I'd ask you 4 questions. First, what gifts have been natural to you for as long as you can remember? Not the skills that you've acquired. Those are helpful too. The capacities that you've always possessed, right? Maybe you're naturally empathetic. Maybe you're exceptional at organizing complexity. Maybe you're an amazing communicator, or maybe people have always trusted you. Maybe you've always seen patterns others overlook. Don't dismiss these because they're easy for you. They're easy because they're yours. Number 2, what challenges have you overcome that other people are still living inside? Not because you're better than anybody, but because you've already walked through the fire. See, the person 10 steps behind you doesn't need perfection. They need someone who's been where they are. Number 3, what fascinated you before the world told you what should matter? Like when you were 8 years old, what captured your imagination? What books did you read? What games did you invent? What television shows did you love? What conversations lit you up? Because your childhood leaves clues. And finally, what patterns do you consistently see that other people miss? This may be the most important question of all because businesses are built on distinctions. The entrepreneur sees what everyone else looks at but interprets differently. When you answer those 4 questions honestly, something extraordinary begins to happen. The random pieces of your life start assembling into a coherent picture. You realize your business has been whispering to you for decades. You just didn't know how to listen. And once you've gotten clear on who you've become and how that translates into something the world needs, the next question becomes even more important. How do you communicate it in a way that the world can hear it? What's the best way to start marketing the you that is your business so that you can cut through all the noise and reach the people who need what you have? Because I believe the single greatest marketing strategy ever created isn't advertising, it isn't funnels, it isn't social media. It's actually something much older and much more human. It's the art of presentation. And by the way, if you're listening to this and you're realizing that you need to sit down and actually work through these questions, that's exactly what I'm going to be doing on an upcoming live webinar that I'm hosting. All the information is in the show notes of this episode, whether you're trying to figure out what business you're meant to build, or you've already built a successful business, but it no longer feels fully aligned with who you've become, or you're doing well, but your marketing feels fragmented, your messaging feels unclear, and you know there's a deeper level of authenticity and impact available to you, this webinar is totally free. I'm going to be walking you through my frameworks so that you can take your lived experience and organize it into a high converting presentation that becomes the foundation for all of your marketing, your sales, your webinars, your content, even the way your team and your clients speak about your business. If that resonates with you, you can click on the link in the show notes and get registered for this upcoming free masterclass. But as I was saying, when people ask me what the greatest marketing strategy in the world is, they usually expect a tactical answer. They expect me to say YouTube or webinars or paid advertising or email marketing. And every one of those things can be incredibly effective, but they're not the strategy. They're simply channels. In other words, they're distribution. The strategy is much deeper. The greatest marketing strategy ever created is the ability to organize your lived experience into a high converting and powerful presentation that gets your potential clients thinking differently about the problem that you solve. And once you understand that, you realize everything is a presentation. This occurred to me when I stopped watching what the gurus were selling me in terms of our marketing strategy, and I started watching how the gurus were selling to me. And they all use the same marketing strategy, a presentation. And everything is a presentation. This podcast is a presentation. Every single episode. A webinar is a presentation. When I speak and do a keynote from stage, it's a presentation. When I meet someone and have a networking conversation, it's a presentation. I look back on my book or my live 3-day event, all presentations. All simple formats for sharing with my audience what I believe, how most of the market has it wrong, what the new and better way is, and my lived experience of coming to this awareness and conclusion. So most people think a presentation is about slides or selling. It's not. A presentation is simply a structured expression of your own lived experience. It's the organized communication of the wisdom that you've gained through your experience of life. And every great presentation is built from the same 3 ingredients: your story, your framework, and your results. So your story creates connection. Your framework creates clarity, and your results create certainty. And when those 3 come together, trust becomes almost inevitable. So let's start with your story. People often say that stories sell. I don't think that's quite right. Stories don't sell. Stories create connection. So when someone hears your story, they're unconsciously seeing themselves in it, and that builds trust. That answers the one question in their head. If this was possible for you, could it be possible for me? That's why your story matters. Not because you need to pretend to be something that you're not to impress your prospects or your audience, because you don't, but because your audience is searching for evidence that change is possible for them. So when I share my story of addiction and recovery or my failed businesses, I'm not impressing anyone. When I share those stories, people go, wow, I guess it's possible for me too. Wow, I relate to that part of David's story. I didn't struggle with alcoholism, but I struggled with workaholism. I struggled with anxiety. I was heartbroken. That's connection. And connection leads to conversations, and conversations lead to conversions. So if the story helps someone believe that something that was previously impossible in their life or their business or their health is now possible, then the story has fulfilled its purpose. So the purpose of your story is not to make you the hero. It's to make your audience believe they can become the hero of their own story. That's authentic marketing. Now, the second ingredient is your framework. So a story inspires, a framework organizes. A framework says, this transformation isn't random. There are principles, there are distinctions, there is a process. Because human beings crave maps. We want to believe there's a path from where we are to where we want to go. And that's why every great thought leader creates frameworks. You got the 7 habits, the 12 steps, the 5 love languages, the hero's journey, the 4 agreements. Frameworks endure because they take complexity and they make it reusable. And what is a framework really? It's your lived experience compressed into a repeatable system. It's years of mistakes and years of experimentation and years of insights distilled into something another human being can understand in an hour instead of a decade. So your framework is simply wisdom that's been organized. Then comes the third ingredient, results. Because every potential customer, every audience member, every investor, every client is silently asking the same question: will this actually work for me? And results answer that question. Maybe the results are your own transformation. Maybe it's other customers or people that you've helped, or case studies or stories or evidence. Not because you're trying to brag, but because certainty reduces resistance. See, people don't buy because they're convinced. They buy because uncertainty disappears. So think about what happens when those three elements come together. Your story creates connection. Your framework creates clarity. Your results create certainty. Connection, clarity, certainty. That is the architecture of trust. And trust, as I said before, has become the most valuable currency in the world, now more than ever. With AI, information is everywhere. People won't pay for information anymore, but they'll pay for someone who has walked through complexity and returned with a map. And that's exactly what a powerful, authentic, high-converting presentation does. It says, this is what I've lived, this is what I've learned, this is the framework that emerged, and here's the evidence that it works. Do you want me to help you do the same? Now, here's the distinction that changed my own business. Most entrepreneurs think they need to create dozens of presentations, and the truth is, you only need to build one. One presentation, one central message, one organizing framework, one story, one outcome. And then allow that presentation to evolve as you evolve. Because I still use the same presentations that I started out with, but they've changed because I've changed. And that one presentation, it becomes your webinar. It becomes your keynote. It becomes your sales presentation. It becomes your investor deck. It becomes your company's onboarding. It literally becomes the communication operating system for your entire business. And most entrepreneurs have 20 disconnected messages, but the best entrepreneurs have one message expressed across 20 platforms. Here's why this matters so much. Remember what we said at the beginning of this episode? A business is the rendering of your lived experience into a scalable vehicle for sharing your essence with the world. Well, your presentation is the rendering of that business into a form another human being can actually understand. You can think about it as your business is the vehicle, your presentation is the broadcast. And without the presentation, the business stays trapped inside you. With the presentation, your life experience becomes infinitely scalable. That's why I believe a high-converting presentation is not merely a marketing tool. It is also one of the highest forms of service because it allows your hard-earned wisdom to become someone else's shortcut. And when you finally understand that, you stop trying to create content or dial up the next online marketing strategy. You stop chasing algorithms. You stop trying to manipulate people into buying. And instead, you organize your story, you organize your framework, you organize your wisdom, and you communicate it with enough authenticity that the people who are meant to work with you naturally recognize themselves inside of your message. That's not sales. That's resonance. And resonance is what scales success. Which brings me back to where we started. Most people think they're choosing a business. I think their business has been choosing them all along. Their life has been collecting experiences, collecting failures, collecting victories, questions, distinctions, perspectives, preparing you for the work only you can do. The entrepreneur's job is simply to recognize it, organize it, then communicate it, and then build systems that allow that solution to reach more people than they could ever serve one-on-one. And when you get that, everything changes. You stop chasing opportunities and you start cultivating yourself. You stop asking, what business should I build? And you start asking, what has my lived experience qualified me to do? Because the answer to that question won't just build a successful company. It might just build you a life more fulfilling than anything you've ever imagined. So if today's episode resonated with you, I'd love to invite you again to join me for the live webinar that I mentioned is coming up here soon. We're going to take these ideas and make them practical. I'll show you how to identify the central transformation hidden inside your own story, organize it into a compelling framework, and build a presentation that becomes the communication engine for your business, whether it's your webinars, your keynotes, your podcasts, your sales conversations, or your content strategy. All of the information is in the show notes. The masterclass is going to be live and absolutely free. All you need to do is click the link in the show notes and grab your seat. I want to thank you for being here with me today, allowing me the opportunity to share with you a little bit of the wisdom and frameworks that I've learned through the challenges and trials of my own life. And again, thank you for spending your time and energy, because if you actually want to grow and evolve and achieve your full potential, as I always say, this is not a do-it-yourself project, it's a do it with others, and I'm glad that we're here together. I love you so much. Thank you so much. I will see you on the live masterclass and in the next episode.